Welcome to LFR on LNK. I'm Dale Johnson and welcome to 2023. This affords us an opportunity to look back at the year of 2022 as we took deep dives every single month into Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Now, normally I'm sitting at a table with one, two, or sometimes three guests, experts from Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Today, you got me. We're looking back at the year in review. We'll go show by show through the program today and review the experts and the subjects that we talked about in the year 2022. And of course, we started with a couple of very well-known experts. Technical Rescue and Technical Coordinator Ashley Engler was on the show a couple of times. By the way, now, 2022 was a big year for Ashley because she became captain and was promoted to captain in 2022, so congrats on that, Ashley. Also joining us a couple of times in the year past was Chief Mark Majors, Battalion Chief Mark Majors, Battalion Chief of Tech Rescue. So in the beginning of the year, we immersed ourselves in technical rescue, and there is a lot to it. There's tribal language that can get in the way of understanding this, but Ashley and Chief Majors did a very good job of breaking it down and understanding this skill set that is practiced by Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Take a look. We are going to talk about technical rescue, something that I learned about and participated in recently at the Leeds Center for Performing Arts. And it's my understanding that this is a skill that is practiced by fewer than 50 men and women in Lincoln Fire and Rescue. It is the technical rescue. And we're going to talk about that today. All right. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ashley, for coming in. All right. Define, I'll turn to you, Ashley. Define technical rescue.
So technical rescue is a set of skills that is what we would define as not normal, average responses that we would go to. So you would have to have a certain set of skill sets that exceed above and beyond what a normal firefighter would have to have.
We're talking about, Mark, jump in here, aerial rescue, correct?
Yes.
This, because typically the viewers watching us today are thinking of firefighters on the ground, fighting fires, providing emergency help on the ground, on the street. What we're talking about today would apply to window washers, radio engineers who climb antennas, anyone whose responsibility is above ground, on a building, working off the surface.
Construction, maintenance workers. We have so many different places in town, so many different businesses that don't work on regular street level.
And the technical part is the equipment and the skills to operate that equipment safely, not only for the firefighter, but for the person being rescued.
Correct.
Yes.
That's right. And it's also what you mentioned equipment, but it's also the training. The training is a huge part of it because it exceeds what's above what our normal firefighting training would be.
Mark, I mentioned fewer than 50 people in
Yes.
Lincoln Fire and Rescue practice this skill set and hone it.
Yes.
These are men and women of truck companies, of which there are 4.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. We have those individuals, and the truck companies are responsible. They're responsible for the technical rescue side of things, just because of the hours of training, the equipment. And in a perfect world, it would be great if everybody was technically trained, but we have to look at taking that number down just a little bit because it's about the training and the equipment, but also being proficient in using that. And if we had everybody technically trained, I think you would find out that our day-to-day responses would be pretty thin because everybody would be in training Monday through Friday and not available for a lot of response time. That's how much training has to go into this.
So I want to thank Ashley and Chief Majors for coming on our show to start the year 2022. I also had in the studio Mike Smith, And we set up the conversation with Mike by going back to 1997 and talking about some of the movies and things that were popular. The film Titanic, 1997, it premiered in theaters. It was also the year that Mike became involved in Lincoln Fire and Rescue. And 2022 was a big year for Mike Smith because he became Assistant Chief of Operations. We talked about his responsibilities, we talked about his background, and we talked about what led him to the promotion to Assistant Chief in 2022. Take a look. A promotion to Battalion Chief
Yep.
in 2019.
That's
I was
right.
there for the ceremony
I know,
with the
and
mayor.
I appreciate that.
At Station 15. You and Eddie Muller, Bob
Yep,
Watton,
yep, correct.
became Battalion 2. There was a Battalion, at one time, correct me if I'm wrong, at one time there was a Battalion 2?
That is correct. So if you remember back about 2012, we did the reorganization, and they kind of mirrored the Madison, Wisconsin Fire Department model. And we did that for a few years, and then just due to some changes and stuff, we kind of went back. And because at that point, then the chiefs, each chief did a 24-hour shift, and then they did an 8-hour day as well. And we just found that we needed to tweak that a little bit. So in 2000, I believe it was March of 2016, we went back to 1 battalion per shift. And then when the 3 of us got promoted, we went back to 2 battalions. Now the significance of that is at 1 battalion, they had the whole city. So at that time, it was 14 stations, and it was just, the span of control was just too much for one individual. So by adding that 2nd battalion, then we were able to split the city in half once again, and then, but that means that also that we help each other. So at fires and anything, big incidents, then there's 2 battalion chiefs there. So one will be incident commander, and the other would be safety.
So when that promotion was made, you and Chief Muller and Chief Watton, that's 60 years of experience.
Yes, correct. And it's kind of interesting that Chief Watt and I both got hired at the same time. And so then we were promoted battalion chiefs at the same time.
And then in November last year, Chief Engler saw the need to create a position, the position that you're currently in LFR administration, Assistant Chief of Operations.
Correct. And that's kind of a, we like to say a new position, but actually it's kind of reinstating an old
Okay.
position, because they used to have 2 chiefs, assistant chiefs, for support and for operations. And then when throughout the years in reorganization, that went away. And so he kind of reinstated that, so that's how I came about for operations.
Logical move
Oh,
because of the
definitely.
fact that Lincoln, well, you go from 1 battalion to 2, you go from
Yep.
having a chief to not having an assistant chief. Lincoln's nearly 300,000 people, a lot of
Absolutely.
responsibilities.
And growing every day. And the call volume's not slowing down either. We're increasing probably about 3,000 calls per year, total calls, that is.
I've talked to Chief Engler. He's very happy. He has made the promotion. Some things have been lifted off his plate.
Yes, they have. I don't know how he did it, but he's a fabulous chief.
So tell viewers what you do, Mike, as assistant chief.
Basically what I do is oversee the 6 battalion chiefs now, and then obviously it trickles down, so I'm in charge of all 16 stations as of now, and basically, what we'll just say roughly 300 firefighters. And my ultimate goal and responsibility is to, since we have 3 shifts, is to keep everything consistent. We try to keep it streamlined and make sure all the chiefs are kind of working towards the same direction.
To better understand why Lincoln is a great place to have a heart attack, we went back to 2013 in a conversation last year where we learned or remembered that LFR partnered with community stakeholders to initiate a comprehensive effort that would improve survival from out-of-hospital cardiac arrests and improve each link of the survival chain. And what better people to have in for that conversation than Dr. Jason Kruger, medical director at the time for the Lancaster County Emergency Services, and from Lincoln Fire and Rescue, Captain Scott Weeb, who is the EMS supervisor for Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Here's a portion of that conversation. I'll direct this one to you, Dr. Kruger. Joining the Cardiac Arrest Registry to Enhance Survival, or CARES. How did that help?
Yeah, Lincoln Fire was the first EMS agency in the state of Nebraska to be accepted into the CARES registry back in 2013. And that allowed Lincoln an opportunity to really measure our cardiac arrest data in a standardized way so that we could compare our outcomes to national outcomes to really see how well we were doing.
Scott, the next focus was on dispatchers.
So we partnered with the dispatch. Obviously, they're the ones that dispatch us to all of the calls in Lincoln. So we look for an opportunity. You know, everybody may not know CPR, and when you call 911, the dispatchers really are the first of the first responders. They take your calls at times of crisis. But the other thing we focus on is they can actually give CPR instructions. Simply directing somebody to push hard and push fast in the center of the chest, you don't have to breathe for them. We found that that is a great predictor of whether somebody survives cardiac arrest in Lincoln. So the dispatchers are a key piece of this puzzle.
To what extent did they already know that?
They were already great. We always look for opportunities, and going back to what Dr. Kruger said, the CARES registry, we also allows us to measure that metric. How often are dispatchers giving CPR instructions, and how often are the callers actually acting upon the instructions?
Back to you, Dr. Kruger. If you and I would have been talking in 2012, a year or so before the CARES Act, the LFR became law, did you think that LFR was doing a pretty good job nationally at that time?
You know, we thought we were doing a good job, but we didn't really have any data to back that up in a
Right.
standardized way. So joining CARES allowed us to really measure how well are we really doing, because we think we're above average, but we didn't have data to back that up.
All right. So again, you're starting in 2013, getting into the CARES Act, fine-tuning the dispatcher knowledge so that they can communicate on-site CPR for people who call in. After dispatchers, attention turned to educating the public, because there are obviously more citizens out there than there are members of EMS or dispatchers. So to get the public involved, bystander CPR was initiated. Talk about that.
Well, so bystander CPR is an incredibly important thing. Basically, it buys us time until either the police department or the fire department can show up with a defibrillator. So when you provide bystander CPR, you're actually creating time and an opportunity for blood flow during that period until a defibrillator can get there and a shock can be provided. And it's pretty incredible, Dale. For every minute that somebody gets on the chest and simply pushes hard and fast, you can recognize around a 7 to 8% improvement in your opportunity to survive a cardiac arrest for every minute. So calculate that. 5 minutes, maybe a 40% better opportunity to survive.
Was Pulse Point around at that time?
Pulse Point came out in Lincoln around 2015, I believe, and that was just an opportunity for us to further awareness on sudden cardiac arrest. And kind of going back to what Scott was saying, when somebody's in cardiac arrest, there's no blood going through the coronary arteries, there's no blood going to their brain unless somebody's doing chest compressions. So by getting bystander CPR, frequently bystanders are doing hundreds of chest compressions before the arrival of EMS, and that substantially improves our opportunity to save a life.
Put us in an ambulance, or when you're driving up to the scene, Scott, and you drive up and you see a citizen already applying CPR. That has to be gratifying, number one, and number two, knowing that they're helping keep that person alive.
That's absolutely right, Dale. And if there's time, I always try and go up and thank them for what they did. And honestly, there's times where they not only provide chest compressions, but they've gone as far to grab a public access defibrillator. There's hundreds of defibrillators all throughout the community where they've actually grabbed a defibrillator, not only done compressions, but grabbed a defibrillator and shocked somebody prior to our arrival. And sometimes they actually have pulses back by the time we get there. So then it moves into the stabilization mode. You know, this isn't about Lincoln Fire. It's about Lincoln as a community coming together to save people from cardiac arrest.
That brought a smile to your face, Dr. Kruger, to hear what Scott just had to say about keeping someone alive while they're lying out in the public, could be on a sidewalk, could be in a business, out in the open.
Absolutely. We've had a number of saves in our community, and that number continues to improve. And it really is, it's an entire community chain of survival. This doesn't belong to just Lincoln Fire, it doesn't belong to just the hospitals. I mean, it's everybody. It's the community members, it's our dispatchers, it's our police, it's our fire department, it's the hospitals working together to get more people back alive, back home, back with their friends, family, school, work. It's a team effort.
Moving right along as we review 2022 here on LFR on LNK, we are to the point where it's not unusual to talk about some pretty heavy subjects during these conversations because there's a lot of responsibility in a lot of different areas for LFR. But we sat down with Battalion Chief Bob Watton and firefighter Brady Studniczka for a conversation that was a little more lighthearted, dealing with public education. It's a big component of Lincoln Fire and Rescue, and a very important component too, because kids are involved, schools are involved. It's an opportunity for the public to interact with Lincoln Fire and Rescue firefighters and paramedics, so that includes fire station tours, that includes getting kids involved, rig demonstrations, and firefighters go into the schools too to teach kids about fire safety. So it was a good shift in conversation that we had with Chief Watton and firefighter Studniczka, and we'll share some of that with you now. So Chief, thank you very much. Battalion Chief Watton and firefighter Studniczka, thank you very much for coming in.
You're
Good
welcome.
to have you both.
Thanks for
Bob
having
and
us.
Brady. Fire station tours. As I said, kids and adults that are kids at heart just love to go into your world.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that first of all. When is a group welcome? Is it a seasonal type of invitation? And let's talk about the size of groups that are welcome at a fire station.
Sure. So it's not seasonal whatsoever. Fire station tours are welcome any time of the year. Due to COVID the last 2 years, we really haven't been able to have a whole lot of tours. Given the circumstances, the last couple of months, our fire stations are now back open to the public, so we're happy to have people back into our home. And it's great for the community. The ages range from 3 to grown-ups to elderly homes. We got people from all different ages come in, and it's just basically they get to understand what we do at a fire station, anywhere from how we live, how we cook there, and how we sleep there. And then we also get to show them around the fire apparatuses, show them all the medical equipment and the fire suppression equipment we carry on the engines, along with the ambulance.
Bob, what's a good size group for a fire station tour?
I think the best size group is probably 15 to 20. It gets too large, everybody doesn't get as many opportunities to see the equipment, touch the equipment, maybe try on a firefighter's bunker coat or something like that. The larger the group, the harder it is to kind of coordinate around. You always have one or two that tend to be a little wilder than the rest, but I think anywhere between 15 and 20 to 25 at the most.
Who conducts the tours?
Well, it's a good question. Generally, it's the youngest firefighter. However, we feel like the senior firefighters have a lot to give because a lot of times it's not just for the kids. We're really educating the adults too on what we do and why we do it, because I think the fire service is probably one of the most misunderstood government agencies there is. Why does the fire department do this? And, does the city pay for this? Do they pay for your food? Just some different questions like that. So it's our opportunity not only to educate the kids and maybe help save them from a bad situation, but also educate the adults on what the fire department does and why they do it.
Take us through a tour, Brady.
Yeah, so generally we welcome the tour in the apparatus bay. First thing we go over is the high possibility of us getting a call during the tour. We don't go out of service when we give these tours. Our number one reason for being at work is responding to emergencies. So that is our main priority even when a tour is proctored. So it's important for the people to know that if we get a call, we're going to have to go out the door and probably reschedule it at a later date. But throughout the tour, we'll start in the apparatus bay. We'll show them our engine again and our medic unit. We'll take them through the kitchen, and then generally that's when the parents start asking a lot of questions. I feel like parents and caretakers ask just as many questions as the kids during these tours, because oftentimes it's their first time being in a fire station as well, and they didn't realize we work 24 hours. We purchase all the food and condiments for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We eat there, we sleep there, we live there. And so the caretakers, the older people, they get a lot out of this tour as well. Once we go to the kitchen, we show them our sleeping quarters. The kids get to see our beds, our rooms, and then we go over the dispatching system, and oftentimes we'll be able to have a simulated call which comes out overhead so the children and the parents and the caretakers can hear what it's like when a call comes in.
Welcome to our year in review. I'm Dale Johnson on LFR on LNK. We're approaching the middle of the year, and in May, it was designated as National EMS Week. And so we took the opportunity in mid-May to devote ourselves to the medical component for Lincoln Fire and Rescue, and it's a big responsibility. About 80% plus of what LFR does has a medical component to it. The ambulance is always there, the rigs, helping people with their medical conditions. And so we talked about this, looking at it as a chain, starting with dispatch, that phone call that comes in by a family member, or maybe it's a member of the public. It could be the patient, him or herself, calling it in. So dispatch from there to paramedics arriving, to the transportation to the hospital, to the emergency room. The paramedics and the firefighters that respond to calls in Lincoln have the ability and are trained to the point where they can declare strokes in the field. And what that does is it just sets up the medical team in the hospitals that much farther ahead before the ambulance even pulls up to the hospital. And to talk about this chain from dispatch to the operating room, we brought in CHI stroke coordinator Hannah Belden. And we want to share some of that conversation with you. Is a stroke necessarily painful? And the reason I ask that, Hannah and Nancy, is because people can function during a stroke. Some can.
Right.
I'm guessing some are more debilitating than others, Nancy?
Absolutely, and one of the markers for us is kind of the pain versus no pain, truly. Often within ischemic stroke, at least in my experience, there was not a lot of pain. But with a hemorrhagic stroke or the bleeding in the brain, that creates a severe headache or can create a severe headache. So that's kind of one of the differential diagnoses for us in the field.
Is Nebraskans, are they the conscientious type of folks to get on the phone and call 911 right away?
So
you're both smiling.
We've done a lot of research. Part of the American Heart Association has a specific project called Mission Lifeline that they work in collaboration with EMS and the hospitals. And we really focus on our rural parts of Nebraska and our critical access areas as well. And we know in some of that data that they have found that these patients that come in, especially from rural settings, don't call 911 for various reasons. Sometimes they're still working and they are able to keep working, so they just keep going. Sometimes they'll go home and take a nap and hope when they wake up it will resolve. And then oftentimes they will drive themselves. I don't feel like they want to burden our EMS partners.
Nancy, we've talked about how minutes count for all medical calls, not just for strokes. So if a call is delayed or help is delayed, what either time frame or what happens the longer it takes to get medical attention?
Time is brain, right. And the sooner that it's recognized and the sooner that they call 911, let us get there, let us begin that patient care. We can do some of the evaluations right there in their home and get the ball rolling, alert the hospitals, both St. Elizabeth and Bryan group. We can call them and let them know that we have a patient that's experiencing stroke symptoms. And they'll be waiting for us when we walk through the door. They literally will be standing there waiting for us, and then the patient goes directly back to the CT scanner.
All right, take us to the field. The EMTs, the paramedics, they're knocking at the door, the call for service is made. Where do you start?
Well, just as any assessment starts, we begin an evaluation and assessment on the patient. We begin talking to the patient. We talk to the family members. We do assessments. There are a lot of things that mimic a stroke. For instance, low blood sugar, or maybe even heat exhaustion. We're moving into the summer months. Drug overdose. There are a lot of things that are mimics to a stroke. So we will do evaluations to rule some of those things out. For instance, we'll check for a blood glucose. And we'll check for those different things. And then we'll do a Cincinnati stroke scale right there in the field. And we're able to then determine, okay, this is the route we're going. And for us, you know, we call it, you know, we go ahead and make it a stroke alert and then get them into the hospital as quickly as possible. And then these guys take over. And, you know, sometimes it happens that it doesn't end up being a stroke, but that's okay. We're always going to err on the side of caution for the patient every time. So if it looks like a stroke, walks like a stroke, we're gonna make it a stroke alert.
Circle back, the Cincinnati, what?
Cincinnati stroke scale. And
Tell me
I'll
about
let Hannah take over because I know that she really wants to talk about that FAST program for our viewers.
Right, so the Cincinnati scale that she's referring to has been around for a long time with pre-hospital evaluations, but we really have pushed to have our community know the same thing, which is FAST. It's the mnemonic that we use for people to keep in the forefront of their minds. And most people do think of those symptoms with a stroke. So face can be a facial weakness, or we might see a facial drooping. Sometimes you only catch it because maybe a loved one's coffee is dribbling out of one side of their mouth. It can be subtle to extreme. The A stands for arms or asymmetry. We use both of those terms, but you can see a weakness of one limb or both limbs. But we use the A for arms to help with that, or an asymmetry. S for fast we use for speech. We have slurring of speech a lot with some of these bigger strokes that we see. And then we've kind of modified the T a little bit to fast. Time is what it's for in the mnemonic that American Heart puts out. We also say think about thunderclap headaches. So these are headaches unfamiliar to the patient, sudden onset and extreme and different than anything they've experienced, because as Nancy mentioned, that can be a hallmark sign of a hemorrhagic stroke.
More firefighters die by suicide than by the dangers of their job. A study by the Journal of Emergency Medical Services found that first responders attempt suicide at a rate 10 times that of the general public. It was a serious subject that we addressed seriously with an individual with Lincoln Fire and Rescue who shared his experience with us. We talked about the stress, we talked about the mental health of Lincoln Fire and Rescue firefighters and paramedics, first responders in general, with Brent Jones, Lincoln firefighter and paramedic, and his personal story. How did that Center of Excellence help you?
So when I got there, you know, it was a scary process. I was the first firefighter in the country to go to this facility. I was there alone, so I was kind of like their guinea pig. It was every counselor and medical professional at the center was like, oh, I got to get my hands on this. So like every interview I did, it was triple the amount of people because I was the only one there and they were trying to learn. And you know, it's kind of discouraging because, you know, you're alone and you're scared and you don't know what to expect and you don't know what's going to happen. And as more firefighters showed up, it wasn't necessarily the staff at the facility, but it's knowing that there's other people that are exactly like you. Everybody that I was there with has the same story. It's, I saw this, or I was part of this, and I did this, and then I can't sleep, and I can't eat, and my personal relationships are failing, and it's the same story. And everybody had the same story. So to know that you weren't alone, like, hey, this is really legitimate. And then obviously the classes that we got to go through and learning how to process the traumas that were stuck, because that's what it is, you get stuck. And once I processed the main cause of my problem, it was like a switch was flipped, and all of a sudden life just made sense to me again. It was like, oh, well, that makes sense. I dealt with what I needed to deal with, and then it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. So that happened about 14 days in. So I was at the facility for 30 days total, and the first couple days I was detoxing, if you will, you know, just making sure everything was out of my system alcohol-wise. And then we started classes, and it was the 14th day, like in the morning.
It clicked.
It was just like somebody flipped a switch, and all of a sudden, I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I slept for the first time unaided with any drugs or alcohol, because they were giving us like trazodone to help us sleep at the center, but I didn't take any prescribed drugs or any alcohol that night, and I slept for 8 hours for the first time in probably 2 years.
We are reviewing 2022. Thank you very much for joining us here on LFR and LNK. I'm Dale Johnson. I mentioned there were 2 guests last year that joined us twice here at the table. Ashley Engler, now Captain Ashley Engler, and also Battalion Chief Mark Majors. Well, we had Chief Majors in to talk about technical rescue, an update on technical rescue, because in July timeframe of last year, Lincoln Fire and Rescue received some dry suits, specialized suits that are used in water rescue, and as important as that is, it also plays a role in surface ice rescue. This time of year, when there is ice on lakes and there's a need to have to rescue people or animals, I suppose, when they fall through the ice. So it's called a dry suit, and Chief Majors brought one in, showed us the nuances of it, the importance of this type of technology for rescuers when there's water involved. Take a look. First, let's give props to Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. They do this all over the country. I believe they've made their presence known in 49 states, $6 million to Hometown Heroes, plus Puerto Rico and Canada. They're there too, benefiting 5,700 organizations and counting, and they come through for LFR.
Absolutely, they did. We looked at it in the first part of this year about applying for this public safety grant. It was quite painstaking to get everything and all of the stuff that we had to fill out during the application process. And all of those hours of work paid off. Firehouse Subs reviewed everything, and we were notified a couple of months later that we did get one of these grants. This grant was absolutely historic and monumental for us and our dive team, because it gave us the ability to designate the $23,000, almost $23,000, that we would have had to spend on this equipment. We can now spend that on the other equipment, so the other important equipment that we have to keep our divers safe. That kind of took one of these big issues, the big ticket item, off of our plates, and now we can work on a lot of the smaller items too.
All right, that object in the corner of your screen is the suit. Let's show that off.
I have one of the brand new suits right here. This is what the suits look like. You can see on the wrists and around the neck and also on the feet. These are pretty well a full encapsulated suit. They have a waterproof zipper. We have some buoyancy compensation right here. It allows just a little bit of air, so when you go deeper into the water and it kind of packs it around your body, kind of sucks in on you, you can add just a little air for more comfort and things of that nature. These suits keep all of the nasty contaminants that are in our water. It keeps it off of our divers, which creates a more healthy environment for all of those men and women that are out there training, and when they actually have to do operations. That's what this suit enables us to do. So,
one size does not fit all. You and I have a pretty good arm's reach. Ashley, in contrast, as brilliant as she is and as effective as she is, she needs her own custom suit.
Yes, it was very important for us in years past, for the last probably 15 or 20 years. We've had suits that are really similar. One problem that we always had was just we had to try and find a few suits, and we picked just a couple in each size. And when we had a bunch of divers show up for training or something else, I need the extra large. Well, that one's already been taken. So we made do with what we had. And we've been functioning like that pretty effectively for quite some time. But to do it right and do it the safe way and the right way, it's important to have all of these suits kind of fitted to our personnel. And it does. It allows everybody from Ashley and a couple of our smaller, shorter divers to have a suit that fits them better. It's not so bulky. It doesn't interfere with the buoyancy, and as well as going up to our taller individuals. And it's so important to just make sure that we just have the right equipment.
Public safety is the #1 priority of Lincoln Fire and Rescue. We talk about that all the time. Student safety is the #1 priority of Lincoln Public Schools. So we combine those two priorities, And we had Joe Wright in, Joe, the Director of Security at Lincoln Public Schools. And we also had back at the table Lincoln Fire and Rescue Captain Nancy Christ to talk about the LFR responsibility for safety and how it meshes very nicely, by the way, with the security priority for Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Joe Wright and Nancy Christ from 2022 on LFR on LNK. As I said, the only way to get stronger is to exercise, and a big exercise took place in October. Joe, I'll start with you. Tell viewers who was there and what was the purpose of that October drill.
We've had an ongoing training exercise for several years now that has grown in size every year as we cycle through each year. And last October was a significant exercise that we conducted along with several other agencies, including the Mayor's Office, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, Lincoln Police Department, and Lincoln Public Schools. And that exercise was constructed and monitored by Lancaster County Emergency Management, who creates the exercises for us so that we aren't testing ourselves with our own problem that we make up. It's a true test of what we do. And we had a fairly significant sized exercise where we created a scenario where Saratoga Elementary School, for whatever reason, had to leave the school. And we had our kids leave and go to their relocation site a short distance away. Then we had buses come in to pick those kids up and take them to our reunification site, which we used as Southwest High School. And while the kids were there, we practiced checking them into the classrooms to keep order of the kids, to keep track of all the kids. And at the same time, we had some volunteer parents and then some other of our employees who acted as parents come in and go through the checkout process so we could see what that looks like. Because you can imagine when parents are coming to a reunification site, they're worried. They don't know if one parent or the other is the one who's going to pick up. So we have to go through things very methodically, make sure the kids are looked after, make sure we track which parent gets which kid, so that if another parent shows up a little later, we can assure them, no, your child is in safe hands and with someone who should have picked them up. And that whole process we looked at in terms of who all would need to be there, who would need to manage what parts of what issue, everything from languages to social workers to help people who might have been in crisis. And obviously we asked all of our community partners to be there so they could see what would be happening on the inside of the school. So as we expanded that to a larger incident exercise next time, they'd know that piece and could use that knowledge to help them do their job better as we go to the next exercise in the next year.
My first reaction is there are so many moving parts involved in this.
There are.
Everything from having enough buses, getting them to the right location, bus drivers, principals, teachers, parents, kids.
Right.
The kids have to have a sense of calm among themselves, and I guess the best way, not the only way, but the best way is to just practice and exercise in a calm fashion. LFR was there. Talk about that October drill.
I think that the October drill was more an internal LPS drill, and the other agencies were able to observe during that time. But then they really pulled us in April for a tabletop, same scenario, similar scenario, but it brought in public safety as the next element. So each one of those different agencies, LFR, LPD, and the mayor's office were all brought in on this tabletop to talk about what our roles look like and integrating and partnering with LPS and having kind of tough conversations to say, you know, each partner is very passionate about their role, and we know our roles really well, but we so often don't understand and appreciate the other side of that coin. So it's a perfect opportunity to appreciate what LPS is doing, what LPD is doing, and how we come together as community partners in a situation that can be horrific.
What better way to wrap up our year in review than the conversation that you've been listening to in the month of December, holiday safety, winter safety. I had Inspector Jason Relford in to talk about all things winter and holiday safety. Everything from the use of extension cords, space heaters. They have a place and they have a proper use. Everything from candles, which are attractive to many people during the holidays, to Christmas tree safety too. So it was a timely conversation, and we do this on a regular basis here on LFR, on LNK. Inspector Jason Relford, as we talk about holiday safety on the show. Winter can be a dangerous season.
Absolutely.
It's got holidays mingled into it, which people, rightfully so, focus on.
Yes.
But there are hidden dangers too, and we'll touch on some of them. Let's talk about keeping warm.
Yes.
Winter weather brings cold and means that people use to stay warm. Space heaters.
Space heaters are a huge concern. One of the biggest concerns that I have with them is that people want them to be close to them, so they will use extension cords, which they're not meant to power those devices. So if you're using a space heater, you'll want to plug that directly into the wall, and now is a great time to take a look at the space heaters that you have in your home. And if it's one that you've had for 15 years, might be a great time to replace it. Make sure that it has some of the modern safety features that we look for, like anti-tip protection, overheat protection, things of that nature, to make sure that when you're using it, it will not cause a fire or an incident in your home.
Jason, I've lived a few more winters than you, and I can remember some of those old space heaters. They just scream dangerous.
Oh,
compared
for sure.
to the safety features that have been built in to the new ones these days.
Between timers and, like I said, the anti-tip features, the ones that we have today, I will not say that they are fireproof, but they have a lot of features in them that make them fire resistant, and a little bit of that prevention goes a long way.
One of the biggest is the tip over
For sure.
mechanism. That didn't used to exist.
No.
They would tip over whether it was a dog, whether it was the kids,
Whether it was,
and it would stay
anything.
hot.
And I mean, with carpets, with rugs, with blankets, with couches, with pretty much anything, if it gets hot enough, it will catch fire. So when you have those extra safety features that are built in to essentially turn this machine off if it's getting to that point, that is definitely helpful. So we want to make sure that our devices have those.
Explain why an extension cord is not a good idea for a space heater.
So a lot of times the extension cords that we have in our homes, first and foremost, they're made of cheap plastics, cheap wiring, and they are not meant to be energized for the length of time that we normally use them. Most people will buy the cheapest one they can find, unfortunately, and they'll plug it in and they will leave it, and it's energized 24/7, and they are generally meant to be used for a temporary amount of time. And when I say temporary, I mean, here's this thing I need to use very quickly, but here's my job, here's my plug-in. I plug it in, I do my job, I unplug it, I move on with life. But convenience often takes over common sense. So we plug it in and we leave it until that time when it becomes a problem. And there's a concept that we have, the normalization of this deviance, where this thing is not a problem for such a long amount of time that we forget about it until it becomes a problem, and then there we find ourselves. So those extension cords, like I said, they're not meant to be used for an extended period of time, and we forget about them until we don't forget about them.
I have enjoyed every one of those conversations that you have seen a piece of today on our year in review. And I'm looking forward to 2023. And I'll share a little insight with you as we wrap it up here. I had an opportunity to participate in a rope rescue drill with Lincoln Fire and Rescue at Southeast Community College, an opportunity to not only witness but to participate in rappelling down the side of a building, and also to participate in the skill that's necessary for rescue in elevator shafts. There would be a need for that. If an elevator would lock at a certain point in a building, how do you get to that elevator in that building? Lincoln Fire and Rescue has figured that out, practices that, so that when that is a situation in the city, they're ready for it. So a little preview of what you will see in 2023 coming up very soon here on LFR on LNK.
Okay, now let go and go upside down a little bit. As much as you can. I got it, I got this.
Go here.
Yep, and then put your hands down. There you go.
Sweet. Sweet.
Now you can come back. Go
Now,
over.
this is where I would be in a window.
Correct, and that's how
Right.
you would hook up on the patient,
Right.
and you hook up to me. Because otherwise, if your legs are down here, I can jump on you.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm doing what work I need to be doing.
Uh-huh.
And then I would right myself back up,
Yep, let's go ahead and get yourself back up.
which is by grabbing this
And putting the leg back over. There you go.
and coming back.
Yep. Keep coming back up. Nope, nope, don't
Nope.
release it until you
Okay.
get all the way up until you're comfortable.
Until I'm seated again?
Yep.
Okay.
And then you can release it. Get that arm out from that belay.
Go.
There you go.
There?
Yep, there you go. Thank you guys.
Are we ready?
Now you're ready. I'm gonna meet you down in the bottom.
Okay.
There you go.
That's coming up in 2023. Thank you very much for being with us in 2022, and we're looking forward to sharing the expertise of LFR in 2023. I'm your host, Dale Johnson.